Test.
Good thing, though.
Yeah.
Good to know what you're.
I just don't like being poked with needles. That's
Good thing, though.
Yeah.
This is here. Good to know what you're.
I just don't.
Whoa. Mayor Pro Temp.
Council president.
I don't know if that's the official name there. I'm just still the council president.
Sounded good, though.
Does sound good, I guess. That's very official.
Never had a planning. Yeah, actually, so anymore. And really disruptive.
Okay,
You help me with my microphone.
welcome everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. This is our city council work session. Tonight's work session is being recorded and live streamed. And counselors, a reminder to please make sure your microphones are on. And okay, yes, and we already called the meeting to order. That's great. And so Sammy, would you take the roll call, please?
Well, Mayor Bell is absent, and then I have Counselor Bowman,
Here.
Counselor Engelbrechtson,
Here.
Counselor Lehman,
Here.
Counselor Myers,
Here.
Counselor Smith,
Here.
Counselor Wells.
Here.
There is a quorum.
All right. And so tonight's meeting is a city council work session as intended for information gathering, staff presentation, and preliminary discussions. The council cannot take any formal or final action on any matters during tonight's meeting. And we also have invited or I should say our planning director, Megan, was thoughtful enough and present of mind enough to invite our planning commissioners to the meeting as well, because of course our tonight's topics relate a lot to our land use and transportation planning. So I want to thank our members of the Planning Commission that are in the audience tonight for being here. And it looks like we have John Marshall, Jerry Bainey, and Marissa Doyle and out there from our Planning Commission. So thank you all very much for being here tonight. With that, I think we can go ahead and get into it. Let's just go ahead and get started then. And so Adam, if you want to take it.
Great. Thank you, Council President Engelbrechtson. We've got a slide deck that we're going to run through as kind of the guide for the evening's discussion. And Megan and I will both jump in and chat. And really, as it is with work sessions, the goal is to really just share some information, have some background documents and discussion for at least one of these. Several of them will show up again at council in a formal meeting. So background, context, discussion, and really questions that you might have that helps us prepare you, when the time comes for decisions. So all four of them are transportation related. Our original kind of slot 3 or 4 months ago for this meeting was a presentation from Lane County Transportation with a discussion about jurisdictional exchange, how that works. They have interest in seeing if we want to take over. I think that's long been a discussion about the pros and cons of Lane County managing North Willamette and Pearl streets. The Lane County staff wasn't able to pull that all together, but just as a placeholder, that will be somewhere in this fiscal year. I think it's worthy of just an FYI, what is a jurisdictional exchange? How would it possibly benefit us? What are the trade-offs and the costs and the management side of all of that? So that was where it originally started with some transportation stuff. And then we ended up having a key replacement that's on the agenda, and then really just took the opportunity to throw in a few updates that I think will be useful on construction projects and on some planning. So that is the scoop. And I think I actually got the slide slightly different order than how the agenda is. So with your permission, I think the loop path comes, I have it second instead of third, and then we'll get into there's 2 construction type projects and then 2 more planning projects. So we will kick it off with the Coleman Street Collector project. I don't know if you want to run it, Sammy, or
I
you wanna
am
hand it off?
trying to get it
Whichever-
ready for Jameson real
Yeah,
quick, so I just
whichever
need
your
another,
preference is.
just a sec,
Okay, no
and I'll
problem.
bring it to you as soon as I have
Okay.
it.
I'll just start with the basics. Yep, Coleman Street Collector. We've actually talked about this one in a prior council meetings. Just as a recap, this is funded through MPO money, and it was actually done with the fund exchange with Lane County, which allowed it to be done as a local project. We don't have to have a certified agency. We'll talk about that more. It shows up in these slides. It also meant that the funds were provided to us. We didn't have to do the project and then get reimbursed. So as you recall from the budget process, we have the 748,000 in the street fund for this project, and it was specifically for a collector street project. So an interesting way that the funds were awarded and distributed to us. So right now it is in the street fund and our capital for the project this year. The original project scope was, and I have a map on the next slide, but the original project scope was North Coleman from Pearl to Mill, and then hooking a left and traveling down Mill for a block and change. From Coleman to Skinner. That quickly, in preliminary engineering estimates, was well beyond the 748,000. So that was the original phase 1 of this project. So what we went back to is looking at the current project scope that you'll see when it's ready for bid here in the coming months.
Yeah.
Is a shrunken project scope, still North Coleman, which is our primary collector street designation, from Pearl to McKenzie, with the inclusion of the, I can't remember the acronym, RRFB, which are basically the flashing beacons, like we have at McKenzie and North Willamette, to be a formalized pedestrian crossing that is consistent with our transportation safety ad hoc committee recommendations from last year, to actually create a safe pedestrian crossing on Pearl at Coleman. So it's a shrunken scope in terms of street length, but it adds the pedestrian beacons, that flashing beacons that we were wanting to get done. That one has an asterisk that will be applied to, has to get approval from Lane County. There's some challenges to getting that approved, as we've talked about before. There's some study that has to be done. There's some trip counts and some other things. It isn't a foregone conclusion that will be approved. We'll let you know when we hear more about that. I think it's likely that we'll get a crossing approved. Whether we get the flashing beacons along with that, there's some real specific requirements that have to be met for a flashing beacon crossing. So TBD on that one, but the project is intended to include that plus 2 blocks of North Coleman. And again, the reduced scope ensures that the total project costs don't exceed the funding available, so we don't run into an issue of having projects going beyond. And the a real driver of that we've talked about before is the design, engineering, permitting, project management, bidding. All of that typically takes up 25 to 30% of the project of the funds available, and then the construction is the other 70%. So the project itself, we're budgeting around 600,000, and then the rest of that is design, engineering, permitting, and project management throughout the project, inspections, all of the things that are required to happen there. The project itself, the timing of the project, this fall, there's some utility relocates that Northwest Natural has to do. There's some tree removals that go with those utility relocates. So we will be involved directly with some utilities in getting the prep work done in those areas. And then also we'll be using that time for some community outreach. So the project is a smaller block length. So there's fewer stakeholders, fewer property owners that will be affected by the construction. Of course, there'll be some traffic control issues for everybody that uses that street, but for the people most impacted, we're probably down to about a dozen or so property owners. So we'll be doing some direct outreach, neighborhood meeting, that kind of thing in the fall. Well in advance of the bid. So if there are any tweaks that are identified in that discussion with property owners, we can make those tweaks before we go out to bid. And we go out to bid likely in February, bid award, January, and a bid award. The goal is really for an early season. So we get in the front of the line with the construction season. Hopefully have that in front of you in February for a bid award, and then construction March through July-ish, depending upon the timing of the contractor.
Is now a good time for a question?
Sure, I'm just going to roll to the map. If it goes. Go ahead, and we'll try and get the.
I'm a little bit unsure about the funding for the project. Maybe I didn't hear it correctly. Is the funding assured, or is it something that we have to apply for and wait and see?
Assured, it's cash in hand. So we have it
Okay.
in the street fund now. Uniquely, it was applied for, it was awarded, and with the exchange of funds from Lane County, kind of a complicated thing because Lane County had plenty of. They are a certified agency, so they could swap some funds and allow us to have these funds kind of just not requiring some of the federal requirements. So yeah, the check was in the mail, deposited, and sitting there in the street fund right now.
So there's no potential for clawbacks or anything like
Correct.
that? Okay,
Correct.
great.
Yep.
That's helpful.
Yes. Yep. So here's the layout. One thing to note, the on the left side there is Pearl running vertical on the screen, and then the project is in the darker shaded colors. So it has the collector street design by approved street standards includes a sidewalk. So there's a sidewalk on the west side of the street. You see that on the diagram, and it also has both infiltration and kind of our version of rain garden, swale, small swales for storm drainage for this street section. And then at the far right side of that slide, you see the protrusion going north. That is McKinsey. That's a local street. We're extending as far as we can to stay within the bounds of a collector street project, but that street has tremendous degradation. So we're going behind the driveway apron of that apartment building there and catching as much of that really degraded street as we can within the scope of the collector street project. So that's really the extent. And it's interesting to note, talking with Councilor Myers before the meeting, we're running about $220 to $250 per block length for street reconstruction. So it's $250,000 a block, roughly. This one, is really it's one short and two and one long block. So they differ a little bit, but just for a scale, the construction bid will be somewhere around $600,000 for what you see there on the screen, and that's a little bit higher because there's a sidewalk, a little more concrete than some of our local streets. But just as a frame of reference, that's what it's taken these days.
Older, thank you. Older. Yeah, just to be clear, the construction scope does not include a flashing pedestrian beacon. Thank you.
Yes, it does. It does include that, but we're not sure we're going to get Lane County approval. So we've just started our discussions with Lane County, and in the process of submitting the studies and the things that they need to even evaluate whether a flashing beacon is.
If we don't get the flashing beacon, we'll still have a crosswalk.
That's the goal. Yep.
We've got traffic going by at 35 miles an hour there, right? I mean, are we going to be able? Isn't it right? Yeah.
It's marked at 30.
Going to stop?
It's marked at 35.
Yeah. I mean, is anybody going to stop whether there's a crosswalk or not? I mean, I was talking to John as we were coming in. I watched 3 cars go by the crosswalk over here, but there's no flashing beacon and people just don't see it. I mean, is it? I guess, is it conceivable that we're not gonna
They
get
just
that?
saw you.
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, they didn't stop though. I mean, I guess my point is that should we even do it if we can't get that flashing beacon? I mean, is it something that can be added down the road? I just, you know, I guess.
I mean, that's a question that's a
stop
question to you.
and-
I would recommend that it
Yeah.
be installed. It's consistent with the plan and recommendations that you all approved. I get it. I would say, I would say the objective would be yes, to install that and then collect the data. That it's one of those, if you build it, they'll come thing. And I think the flashing beacon will, if we don't get it at the beginning, we can get it after the crossings there and we have people using it, and then it builds up data to get to the actual flashing beacon. It's a challenge. You know, the hard part is the rules that are in play for that make it challenging to get it straight up the whole thing, the whole package. But that's, I mean, you could pull that and say we'd rather wait on the whole thing until we can do a flashing beacon. Before we get to the bid, we can, I mean, we'll definitely give you an update of what Lane County's response is on that.
Okay, so let's, yeah, it looks like a lot of people have comments, questions, so we'll try to get those in, and then also let's try to save like a lot of, if we're doing a meaty discussion, let's save it for after Adam has had a chance to get through, if we can. Counselor Lehman?
So do you have a plan if we have a cost overrun?
Well, we won't award the bid. That's, you know, that's the, you know, that's the plan, unless you want to spend more from the street fund. So it will, when we get the bids back and we bring it forward for bid award, if that is, you know, anything over, you know, the total project cost of the 748, you will know, and you can decide whether you want to move forward with additional funds, or we don't accept the bid and we decide what to do later. Ultimately, you know, this money is dedicated for the Collector Street project. So one way or another, that, you know, that's what the money is for. And
We
that
have sufficient funds if we have cost overruns or change orders that affect the bid.
sufficient. I mean, we have funds. It impacts other things we want to do in the street fund. But yeah, we will definitely, you know, make you all aware of what the give and takes are when we get that back.
Counselor Smith?
Just a quick comment to follow up with Counselor Wells. I cross there all the time on Coleman and Pearl. And if we can even just get a crosswalk and put some of the orange flags, it will help, because you can stand there and they don't stop. But if there's anything visible at all, it will help,
Okay.
Yeah.
even if it's painted.
I try to cross it at least once a week, you know, and when I'm out on walks and do things, you know, just to see it. And it's, you know, the other part of this is it also includes the concrete to get those, both have ADA, but they're not current standard. So it replaces the concrete work on the sidewalks for the curbs. So those will all meet current ADA, and it really continues. The idea, of course, is that this collector isn't just North Coleman. The Collector Street is South Coleman as well, and then turning and heading either, we'll have a conversation later, either on Delaney or Dixon back to North Willamette. And that's the whole point of a collector, is it, for all modes of traffic or transportation, it feeds in. So you go from the neighborhood streets to the collector streets onto the arterials. So you build that as you go. And so that's the intention, is to have a very, and hopefully that helps on the Lane County thing, is to say, hey, this is not just a, you know, we want the flashy beacon because this is our collector. You know, it's more than just a neighborhood street, and it should have long-term trip counts that support a collector street.
Counselor Bowman, did you still have?
Yes, I will. I feel obliged to say, based on my personal experience as a wheelchair user, I appreciate the orange flag idea, and it's better than nothing, but I don't find them particularly helpful because I can't hold the flag, let alone return it to where it's supposed to go. So from an accessibility point of view, flashing beacon is mightily preferable.
Thank you. That's all good comments and questions.
Planning commission.
Okay, yeah, well, I didn't know if, are there any questions right now from planning commissioners? Okay, because I know he's still got some more to go on
I do.
presenting, but sure, go ahead, Mr. Marshall.
Since this crosswalk was a recommendation of the ad hoc committee, is there some reason why it's tied to this project? And whether or not, is there a fallback plan if your project where Coleman doesn't go through to still get the crossing put in?
It's tied to this because of its funding and it fits in a collector street. So we were able to kind of leverage and use external funding. If we don't tie it to this and we don't use the collector street funding, we have to figure out different funding for it. And it's 50 to 75,000, itself. So we could do it outside of this project.
My question was, for fallback, since that was a recommendation, and that is a safety concern, that if you don't get Coleman collector funded, can somehow still get the crossing put in.
Yes. But we have the funds for the collector. If the bid comes back way high, we have a lot of different ways that we could further shrink it and retain the crossing as an option for council. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Doyle?
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but I live on East Mackenzie and almost daily, there's always a car that just flies through that intersection, even though there's stop signs. So I just didn't know if you guys were aware of that. I can see it just like 2 or 3 times a day, maybe multiple. So just giving you a heads up on that part. So maybe if you don't get the funding, at least do something in that intersection. So, thanks.
Sounds like an enforcement.
Yeah, and we do have the funding for, just to be clear, we have funding of $748,000. So I think what some of the counselors are worried about is that when we start getting bids, they're going to be higher than that for this project. But and I appreciate your comments because it underscores the need for these pedestrian safety issue mitigations. I think we have, if the bids were to come in over our 748, we don't have wiggle room in our budget to just go over that. Probably it would have to be a decision of the whole council, not just me. But there is obviously possibility of scaling back the project more. But I think it's a very good point that the crosswalk and pedestrian safety should remain at the top priority for whatever we're able to do.
The challenge with that crossing is Lane County will require the ADA ramps on both sides to be upgraded, and that's part of what's in this project as well. So if we don't do the rest of the project, it's just more expensive to do just that concrete work. But all of these dovetail, and we'll know well in advance of actually putting it out to bid whether or not that crossing is approved by Lane County. That's part of our that's part of the early due diligence to before we get to a bid scenario is what we put out to bid. Do we have the legal approvals to actually construct it? We don't want to bid until we know we can legally construct it.
Let's do one more for right now. And then we'll let Adam keep going.
Hit on, can we put the infrastructure in for this lighted crosswalk, even if we don't get the approval from Lane County? I mean, will we do that? Will we have the ADA approaches? Will we have the conduit in place to run the electricity? Will we have everything in place? And as soon as we do get that, we can just plug and play instead of having to dig up everything and start all over again.
Yes, I believe. Yeah, I think that makes total sense. I think we should do as much as we legally are allowed to do by Lane County is the take, and we'll bring it back. And if we want to scale it back, I mean, that's just kind of the current marching plan. But obviously when we bring it back and tell you what the full extent of what Lane County allows, then we can decide from there what we want to do before we go out to bid, which is one of the benefits also of, we were trying to rush Coleman and get it done in this last construction season, and for a variety of reasons kind of held off. And I think that gives us time to work out a little more involved stuff. And Lane County is, letting us know what they need to do to give us the answer, and it's not insignificant either, what we even have to produce for them. And just one last thing on this is the 748 isn't the construction price, because we have to take 30% off of that. So the construction bids need to be around 600.
Hey, Adam, I said I would let you kind of finish presenting this, and then
Okay.
we'll ask
Yeah.
for any other questions or comments after
Yep,
that.
that was it for Coleman.
Okay.
So we got 1 out of 4.
Okay, so if that was it for Coleman, then
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize
I had-
you didn't have more to say. Yeah.
As far as upgrading the crosswalk with the yellow ads that have been put in all throughout Lane County, isn't that a requirement of the county to upgrade all of the intersections? And does that have to come out of the money for this project? I mean, are they eventually going to have to upgrade those areas anyway on ADA funding? I was curious, if it comes out of the budget for this, if it's something that legally they're required to do outside of improving this.
They ultimately will need to do that. What the trigger is, is different. If we are making improvements, we bear the responsibility to pay for those
Okay.
improvements. They eventually
be
would.
upgraded once we do it.
They're, if the idea is that they'll chip in because it's their facility, that won't happen. I know that.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the upgrade, what we're doing triggers the fact that it has to then be ADA code compliant.
Right. Yeah, those can be left alone. But if we want an actual, even just the painted crossing or the beacons, they have to meet current ADA standard.
Okay, thank you.
If I could provide just a little bit of added context to Councillor Smith's point, the law, as I understand it, says that anytime anything is upgraded, it has to come up to standard. It can't stay where it is, and it certainly can't go back. It has to come up.
Right.
And it's the responsibility of the jurisdiction initiating the improvement, as I understand it, to pay for it and to cover it.
If we didn't initiate the improvement, eventually Lane County would need to go through and do it.
Okay, but there's a separate pot of money just for that. That's what I was hoping for.
Yep, no, it's good. I get where you're trying to get. Yeah.
Good question. Commissioner Bainey, did you have something?
Yeah, just a comment. There was some talk about if the project goes over, we cut back the project or we look for other revenue. And I just want to make the point that the money that's being collected monthly for the TUF, the transportation utility fee, that's dedicated money only for repairing. So you couldn't use that money in that fund for any over cost of this fund. Is that correct?
Good. Yes, I mean, any of our capital, any of our funding in the street fund, other than the tree fee, that's the only part that would be restricted, that wouldn't be allowed for any capital. Yeah, the TUF could. About 2/3 of the TUF is paying debt service now on an existing project on Roberts and North Industrial. So that is 2/3 already spoken for. But yes, that's within the street fund is where we would talk with council about covering any additional costs that would come from a bid change.
I would only caution that might be a tough sale to use that money when people are expecting our local street to be fixed and then dumping that money into.
Yep, there isn't enough money to go around to fix all the streets we've got. We know, yeah, that's for sure. This pot just happens to be limited and dedicated to collector streets, which is, what we're trying to maximize those funds. But every month that goes by, the projects get more expensive.
Okay, anybody else want to chime in on the Coleman Street collector? Okay, thank you, everybody. Ready for the next one, Adam?
Okay, Loop Path. This one has been a little less discussed in council, and I'll get to the reasons, but the Loop Path 4 project is an extension of the existing path that goes off Sarah Lane and dead ends there right now at North Industrial. It will turn the corner going north and head all the way to Trails End. There's one section that's existing about 2/3 of the way down that it connects to and then extends from, and I'll show the map, but it is another MPO funded project. It's about a 1.3 million. There's been quite a bit of redesign back and forth with the property owner that abuts it about easements and how to navigate around certain impediments, transformers, large trees, signs. And so it took a little bit longer to go. It was delayed 1 year. The city has a just under 11% match, so there's about 130,000. And again, this is a street fund expense of 130 that was in the budget. And again, as Commissioner Bainey said, that's a combination. Typically, when we're getting external funds, there is some sort of a match. That's what makes the collector one we just talked about pretty unique. There wasn't a match. This is a match that has already been committed to by the city and is in the budget, in the street fund budget to be contributed to the project. It's for every dime we spend, we get 90 cents, for it. So ends up being a pretty good deal to continue and extend the loop path all the way to Trails End as part of the overall master plan. Another kind of large segment to connect the dots to the loop paths master plan of actually going through Trails End and wastewater plant and back around on the big long period. The other thing that this is some paving on North Industrial, which is a pretty wide street. So it's an important and heavy rigs, and it is a really good and necessary section of paving. Starts about 800 feet north of the intersection of Pearl, and it's about a half and half. It's about 650-ish for the path, and 650 or so 700 for the paving. Let's see, it's this one because it is federal funds. It is designed and managed by the city of Eugene as the certified agency. So they agreed to take this on as a certified agency on our behalf. So they managed it all. They did the bidding. They did the bid awards. All of that is done by them as the project managers. We basically are the beneficiaries and the payers of the match, and they handle the rest. The bid award happened about 3 or 4 weeks ago to Wildish. Super competitive bid. It came in, I think, within $45, but for them and the next bidder, the third and fourth bidders were a little bit higher than that, but it was really competitively bid. So I think we'll expect a good outcome there. Project start is about a week from now, and completion middle to end of October. So that's exciting extension of the path. I think that'll be really great. And City of Eugene has done a great job at navigating kind of the ins and outs of the challenges that we've had on easements with the property owner and redesigns and all that stuff. So shout out especially to Sean. He's doing all the day-to-day work. He's done a great job. So we have work. All right. So this is not a very great map. It's a really long string. So there's all these match points. So it's not very easy to show on one slide where it is, but the top left is where it takes off from Sarah Lane and the sidewalk end at North Industrial. And so it gets a little bit closer to the curb, not all the way curbside. There is a small park row between it, and a whole lot of engineering challenges with those driveway aprons and the slopes for the big trucks. That's where some of the easements came into play, was to kind of catch grades and scoot in further. And then you can see a little couplet, a little mini pedestrian couplet a little further down, and that's to split the sidewalk. Kind of goes one-way traffic on each side. I don't know if you're seeing that one, but it's couplet is this transformer, which is a hard one to work around. It was going to go all the way behind it, so I'm sure engineering the, kind of odd, but it was required because we didn't have any opportunity to use any easements. So the project then, if you go to the match line, the bottom is where the no gray color, that middle section, that's the existing sidewalks that's there with the prior development. It was installed during development. I think was given SDC credits for that. And then it returns to the darker gray and goes almost curbside. And then the last about 400 feet, it pops out to the street. So it's one of those painted lanes in the street, just tons of really large mature trees that there was no way, there just wasn't any room to fit that in. So the last 400 is on existing asphalt. So that's the path portion. And I didn't take a snap of the paving. It's quite a bit more low key and boring. Just paving replacement that's of some stuff that needs it. Trying, it wasn't doing it.
Okay. Well, let's see, were there any comments or questions from anybody on the Coburg Loop path?
That one's off and running. I think it's another one of those 4 or 5 years in the making projects. I think a long time, maybe even more. Yeah, yeah.
One question, just real quick.
Sure.
How likely, I mean, once this is done, what about all of the diagonals across these big fields, these farm fields? How are discussions coming with the owners of those properties?
No discussions that I'm aware of. I think those are conceptual, right?
Oh,
That's
that's conceptual. at
yeah,
this point?
that's eventual. I mean, it's a matter of the master plan has kind of this figure 8 that goes around.
Yeah,
So there's
right.
lots of different sections that I think are, opportunistic. I think probably that stuff will end up happening as it typically does is with development, activity and, UGB expansion, annexation to acquire the right of way because it requires right of way or easement to do it.
Be a
But
long time, but I mean, is it feasible to have some conversations with those property owners saying, hey, could we potentially, would you dedicate some of that land to some of your land to a path that would go, bisect your property? I mean, I'm happy to have those conversations if somebody's not already doing it.
no, I mean, it's not on our, it's not in our 2-year, it's not in our strategic framework. It's not, it's more in the opportunity phase. I think that's, the Park and Tree Committee clearly is connected to that. Generally, that's a council retreat, maybe a conversation about where to put that in a priority. And then of course, where's the funding to actually, typically to acquire that, there's costs for acquisition and obviously for development of a path system. So it could become a priority. It is an opportunity thing right now.
It was my understanding that those were placeholders, but I think, would that require a master plan update? Because I know the original loop path that we did was in the parks master plan. When Petra was here, that was developed. And so to do another group of paths may require a master plan update to include that. I'm not sure.
It would probably want to revisit it for sure,
Yeah.
whether or not it needs to be formally updated or not, we'd have to check and see. But yeah, absolutely, it would be something to, that's multiple work sessions. That's a heavy lift. I mean, that's a lot of legal staff and I mean, it's a great project, and obviously it's envisioned to connect to the bike path at Armitage or where the crossing, the old railroad track stuff. And there's a couple different routes there. I think there's a potential to have that conversation with any future eWeb pipeline conversation. That's often another way that these happen is with with infrastructure development. If you need a PUE for utilities, and you're disrupting the land, you actually, you pave on top of it and you have a trail system as well. Lots of different ways it could move forward. I think, from my perspective, we have nothing in the pipeline for it, and we would need to have a conversation about if that's a high priority and not do other things. We currently don't have the staffing to do that.
So conversation, there's no set wish as to where that path would go, right?
We had,
Yeah, there is.
Like, yeah, there was for what we're working on to this point, and I think there's one more phase, and is it the completion south? And then over and above that, at the time, these developments weren't a part of the discussion, but it did come, I will say, I remember back with the SDCs, it took a great deal of the SDCs to do the loop path because there were matches and whatever. So it's kind of, like Adam said, it isn't impossible. And as we develop, I think, you know, Parks and Trees would also look at that, but
Seemed like, I mean, the first place to start would be to make a list of the property owners that need to be contacted to possibly acquire those property,
Yeah.
and
right of ways and stuff, yeah.
it,
And maybe with paving, we can include a wide enough street that we can do painted bike lanes as well.
well, Claire, I guess I mean that is somebody talking to these farmers that own this land saying, hey, someday would you consider dedicating, 15 feet of your property for a, a bike path or loop
That's
or
another
whatever.
question.
If nobody's making those contacts, it wouldn't be a bad time to do it. Just say, this may not happen for 25 years, but, just what do you think of it? Is it, am I making sense here?
Yeah.
I thought we were already on that, I thought we were had already made contact with those owners and said that, someday we would love to see the Coburg bike path or loop go through your property.
I think I can kind of speak to that because I
Okay.
have been here actually long enough I was on this, it was a long time ago, but we had a citizen advisory committee for the loop path. I think
Mhm.
maybe Jerry Bainey was on that too. And I can't remember if Marissa was or not on that one. But the kind of idea was, we're a small city, we're strapped for funds.
Oh, yeah.
And the idea was that it would just, the general idea was that this was gonna happen as development occurred. And
Mhm.
so there wasn't necessarily a directive to go out and try to, talk to landowners. It was,
This is EFU land that you'll never build on. So,
well, let me just say, all of the loop path that has been built so far has been when,
Mhm.
I think, and I might be forgetting about something, but like all on the east side of town, it's all been as properties have developed, then another leg of the loop path has gotten built. So that's kind of
Okay.
mostly how it's gone so far. But I mean, I think you could talk with Adam if there's a counselor like yourself, Counselor Wells, that would be,
absolutely.
interested in trying to plant a seed with some people. I don't know if that
That's a good way.
might not be a bad idea. I don't know what
Conceptually,
what
that's,
staff thinks about that.
yeah, conceptually, that's fine. Being able to act on it and put some easement language in front of them. We're not even close to that, because we're not even close to knowing where it really should be. We've got the wastewater treatment plant, which obviously we own a segment to the north of the wetland park, but the wetland park doesn't even have it all the way through. It's a dirt, I'm not sure if that's appropriate to have a multi-use path all the way through it. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Those conversations I don't think have happened, at that level of detail yet. And after you get to the wastewater plant, we also need to secure that spot. We can't just have people in there, but that is a leg potentially that we have already access to, and we have an easement along the rest of it to get out to North Coburg. But then we have, obviously Lane County right of way and what their long-term plans are. I think it gets complicated really fast. Both the money and the legal, and really getting the right combination to get the linkage. Where do we want it to land back in? I think that typically is dependent on development, and property owners typically will hesitate until they know what they're doing from a development standpoint to mess up, grant an easement. They could conceptually say, hey, I don't oppose it, but that doesn't get us anywhere. There's no binding. It's nothing binding. And I think that's, in my experience in other places, that's the challenge. Is they're all for it, except that it might bisect or cross somewhere that has economic value in the future, and they say, I'm gonna have to hold off until they know what they're doing. And stuff that is long-term in EFU that's stays outside of our UGB, even a conceptual UGB where we think the UGB might be, that gets challenging too. It's a transportation facility in on EFU land that still requires land use approvals, still requires county approvals. You know, it's, there's a lot to it. It's a great, I mean, that master plan is smart. You know, that was really smart to have done. It's really smart to be able to build segments on opportunity, either development or external funding that is really geared towards multimodal. You know, and how far ahead of it to get or proactive to get is always challenging, because you could be chasing something, a lot of effort that may not ever come to fruition. But it's really cool. It's a unique thing for this community to have such a good amount of it built out already. It's really cool.
Thanks, everybody, for the good discussion. We're ready for the next topic.
Okay. This one goes from projects to planning, and more shared here with Megan and I than just me recapping projects.
Sure.
All right. Yep. Thank you. Perfect. So the East-West Connector feasibility study. So this was one that was accomplished and kind of locked in before I got here. So I'm still in the study mode of the history. There's quite a long formal and informal history to this. Megan has a better handle on some of this than I, and then I think some of the planning commissioners may have some great additions to the conversation as well. So what we've got, we tried to put together. There was a need identified locally here in Coburg, and the origins of that issue and the desire for this study dates to around the 2013 TSB timeline and the UGB amendments, with a portion of that remanded and not pursued further. The concern started with a general concern for existing, and I put this is when some of the emails that I grabbed hold of, existing at the 2019 era and future commuter and freight traffic. You know, the amount of north to south primarily. I mean, I guess it flips bound depending going back the other direction, but north to south freight traffic to get through town and what it was doing to downtown. Additionally, there was concerns of the dangerous or very anecdotal definition of failing. Future engineering analysis isn't failing, and to this day is not failing the intersection at Coburg and Bottom Loop from an engineer standpoint. But that was a concern that was raised before the application was put in for this feasibility study. And then the final, one of the other final pieces to the justification or the reason for the study was a concern of the traffic overflow and congestion that we've all seen when I-5 closes and it detours through. We'll get into some of the issues, and we'll repeat this a couple times, and this is similar to the conversation we just had about the loop path. The roadway that is the kind of the theoretical roadway that was put forward to study on the north end is not in the city limits, not in the UGB, and similar to Councilor Wells, that it's in EFU land that may not develop for a long time. And it would be a Lane County facility. So the idea here, if you can go next slide, the idea for this conversation is really to make sure that everybody is up to speed, that this is sitting out there, and it was sitting out there for 2016 project start date. So Megan and I, knowing that's in our world coming up real soon, we started to have our initial conversations, and looking at the awarded, we aren't funded, but it's awarded on a reimbursement. So the funds are available to start the project. We needed to do a bunch of pre-planning. And as we did some pre-planning, we felt we needed to check in and everybody up to speed and see if we were, how we wanted to move on this. So it's an MPO funded project. It is a planning feasibility study only, which is a lot of, transportation traffic modeling, and trip counts and all of that. Very traffic engineer dry, I would call it. Yeah, pretty technical. And it's got a 10% or so match. So it's MPO about 360 and the city 40. And the objective is to evaluate a potential north end collector, and that's the map. There's a map you have, and we'll show some more drawings on a map here on the screen, to divert freight and commuter traffic from downtown and instead get it around town and over to the I-5 interchange generally. As I said, the funding's allocated for a 2026 start date. It does require, as the other projects we've talked about, a certified agency to manage the project. None are currently identified. We've poked around a little bit. Nobody's chomping at the bit to do these days when they're retrenching a little bit in their transportation engineering teams. They don't really want to have capacity to take on any. It's a voluntary thing. If we don't have a certified agency, we just don't get to do the project. We likely, LCOG is our likely spot for an agency to do this with us. But really, like I said, the discussion objective tonight, and this is kind of more of the marquee item out of the 4 on the agenda, is, does council support still remain for this project, given that it really started in discussions in the mid 2010s, and the funding application, I think, was 2022, early 22. And we're nearing the time to spend a lot of staff, workload on project scope, community engagement, public participation, stakeholders, all of that, and some of the early regulatory hurdles. So next slide. So I'll give, this is a little blow up. It's very similar to what you have there in your 11 by 17 map. I've just done some drawings. The green outline is the roadway. The dotted line going horizontal across would be the new that would then connect to the north-south, which is North Industrial. That's the vertical part of that. So I drew the 3 purple circles are where the intersections are, the major intersections. So that intersection is North Coburg and this street. If you go west, that is intended to connect to Powerline. So it would go all the way it would bisect Stallings and go to Powerline Road. Going east, it dead ends into North Industrial, and then head south to the intersection, the signalized intersection at Pearl and North Industrial. So that dotted line is the feasibility study area, and of course they look at trip counts of all the current and future intersections. So the arrows there on the right are just kind of some elements that just kind of hopefully factual elements about the project. And then we can get into some opinions or maybe some thoughts from the staff side. The roadway, like I said, goes from Powerline to North Industrial. It crosses EFU, riparian and wetland areas. It crosses Muddy Creek, and as well as developed industrial lands. As you see, it cuts through the buildings out there at Coburg North. And of course, on the other side, from North Coburg over to Powerline, it cuts through existing residentially developed properties also, which is, not uncommon for a long range. Most cities have a transportation system plan that shows long range future streets. Theoretically, where they actually happen is often different, but people typically freak out, rightly so, when they see a map and go, you have a street going through my house. That's not uncommon for a 20, 30-year looking transportation plan. So that's what this has. Of course, it's not 20 or 30 years. It's a feasibility study for relatively soon. So it would require a bundle of right-of-way acquisition. It would, and of course, that's why it typically happens with development, because the right-of-way acquisition happens with development. It likely would add trip counts to the Pearl North Industrial intersection, which actually is an intersection that is functioning pretty well at capacity now. A lot more to it would be problematic. The debate would be, does it add to it, more than people coming through town and turning on Pearl and going there anyway? Just, they'd be entering that intersection coming, from north to south rather than coming from west to east, theoretically. Again, it's outside the Coburg jurisdiction. It's a Lane County roadway. If you look at that map, the dotted grid is, very theoretical future street grid for, UGB expansion. And that's where some of this, came from. It was during that discussion period. And one of the bigger, one of the bigger hitters in this is it requires regional funding and regional prioritization to design and construct. We wouldn't be the leaders in this. It would be similar to the ODOT conversation with the interchange in that more cheerleaders than having a functional stake in the game. The looking at these lists when Megan and I went through this and kind of building this is that second one. It's crossing. There's quite a bit of regulatory, and if you want to highlight a little bit of some of the regulatory challenges that this designed roadway would bring, and that this study would hit on in more detail. But
yeah, as was already mentioned, that proposed location is exclusive farm use land, which is highly protected by the statewide planning laws. And there is a definite conflict between using a rural road to serve urbanization. And so this would require a process called a goal exception, which is would be goal 12 is our statewide planning goal for transportation. The county actually, perhaps a joint application would have to seek that, which is a significant legal barrier. So that is one of, I think, several barriers legally without some of the other issues.
We had some preliminary conversations both with LCOG and with Lane County Transportation staff just to get our bearings on this and just scope it, just really preliminary. And they're supportive. It's been awarded, right? We've been allocated. We haven't got the funds, but it is legit. Funds are there. We could start in on the project. I think there was a general head nod around the room from the staff side of things with both of those entities that this is it's a feasibility study. And I think you could look at it without digging into all the transportation modeling and say, probably not very feasible, without spending $400,000 and saying that this has a lot of issues. And I think in the mid 2010s, if that development, the wastewater plant had just come online or right about online, I think all of our water master plan projections showed a population increase far greater than what we actually realized. We've talked about that before in our rates conversations. And ultimately, the UGB expansion was remanded. So a lot has transpired since then. And as well as we've done some, we have some strategies and done some things that maybe have ameliorated a little bit some of the issues. We don't really have any data that talks about freight. What is our percentage of freight traffic? We have clearly some, without having to do too much, we know we have Rexius traffic. This was before I think Rexius showed up there. We don't have good data on really what our commuter is, what our freight is, and there isn't any assurances that people would, if they're not wanting to go to I-5, if they're going into Eugene or Beltline, would this ameliorate the issue? They could still come through town. It doesn't mean they have to take a bypass, right? So the question really for everyone is, given the time that has gone by, given the situations that may have changed from population growth trajectory, and the fact that the statewide goals and land use regulations have not lessened, for sure. Is it worth jumping into and doing? And now is really our best time to come to council. And this isn't a decision for tonight. It's a discussion to make sure we answer as much as we can and then be prepared to give you good information when we do have a formal conversation. Is it worth moving forward on? And we've got kind of a yes, no thing that we can hit on the next slide. But if you want to chime in first.
Counselor Smith?
probably Kathy and Jerry probably know, being on the MPO, how was this project prioritized? Is it something that we fought for so that the MPO would, did it take a long time to get to the top of their priority list? And if we stop it, does it go off and we start that process over? I'm not sure how the process of the project worked, but.
I can't speak to that.
I can speak to the project solicitation process a little bit. So this was the first time, at least in my experience, that this project was proposed to the MPO. And typically, it is not based on any type of, our partners do not prioritize the projects. So every partner brings forward the projects that they would like to propose for funding. And then there's sort of an agreement made on to how to disperse the amount of money that is available. So I would say no, it was not the case that this had to wait in line for a long time, and that this could be proposed again at any time.
And it wouldn't delay, because it was what, proposed in 2013?
It was put into the TSP in 2013, but the funds were applied for in 2022.
So would it need to go back into the TSP process to then go to the MPO? Is that how it?
No, this choosing not to move forward at this time would not remove it from the TSP. We would just be kind of passing on the funding opportunity at this time.
There's, yeah, if we could hit maybe that next slide might help answer that, I think. Let's see. Go to the next one.
Yeah, Counselor Smith has another question. Might as well ask while we're getting
And
the
I
slide.
know that our population has not expanded enough maybe to justify it, but certainly the people north of us have really grown, which has caused a lot of the through traffic. I mean, Harrisburg and communities north of us, their population grew significantly, which does bring the traffic to us, even though our population doesn't mandate it. What we're getting from them, their populations continue to grow, which causes a lot of the congestion and traffic.
Yeah, and I guess part of the question is, what is a lot? You know, in terms of trip count, what is the capacity of a regional transportation system? So, you know, this is, as Megan said, this is a you know, trying to use rural land to solve an urbanized, you know, created issue. There was a lot of email stuff that I tried to sort through, and to get to that, a lot of that goal exception work, it doesn't, that doesn't matter. You know, it's real what you just described, but it isn't a part of the formulas and you know, criteria by which something gets something like this would get added necessarily. You know, obviously the populations that we're talking about, they have multitude of ways they can get where they're getting. And part of the idea of this feasibility study is maybe to answer some of those things, is to go from anecdotal to what is the data. And I think that's interesting. I think it's valuable. The question isn't, is that valuable? The question is probably more like, does it move the needle for us? You know, and that probably is really what we're posing forward, is it's unlikely to move the needle. It would provide us with some data. It would provide Lane County with some data. I don't think anyone, as Megan said, the region, nobody is opposed to this. What I think is more likely is it's not even close to the region's transportation priority in terms of capital spending. And that's really part of the practical conversation, is even if the feasibility study said, hey, yeah, in 2036, 2038, you know, something like that, you know, the capacity of the existing road system, or when you hit certain triggers, is going to need this road. The question still remains, does Lane County want to put forward and fund it? Because we can't because it isn't ours and it won't be ours. The only way it'd be ours is if we our UGB expanded out to or beyond where that road is. And I would say that that's likely, 10 years at a minimum away. And then I think probably maybe all of us or none of us in the room in 10 years from now that are wondering, is that feasibility study from 2026 useful in that conversation and decision? So that's kind of the context of what we're bringing forward. And again, no decisions tonight. We would love feedback on, what elements you still may want some more information about. And I think even some of these questions are helpful for us to frame it better. But this slide, is, what I think the fork in the road is. And really it's trying to be cognizant to some of our prior projects and issues where we're spending money and then we're scratching our heads, it wasn't worth spending. And that's why we're trying to bring these forward to you at the early fork in the road, because sometimes once that fork's happened, trains left and we're spending money. If council ultimately decides that this is still a valuable feasibility study, we'll attempt to find a partner to manage the project. Out of that list, I would think LCOG is probably our only kind of viable one to, coerce or, twist into saying yes. And then city staff, by end of winter, start of spring, would need to really dive in on the project scope development, public participation plan, stakeholder engagement, really define the project. Because the application is three paragraphs. It's a very light application. It's really more of an allocation rather than a deep dive into the merits of the project, as Megan was saying about how those funding allocations happen. It was the city said it was important, and the group allocated a certain ratio of funds at that cycle to Coburg as a member of MPO. So then the next, after that would then be in the next budget, coming in next March, would be budgeting that 41,000. And, honestly, a bundle of workload. That would be a work plan chunk for both Megan and myself, more Megan than I probably. And it'd be a large project for us. And again, if it's valuable to council and it moves collectively think it moves the needle, then then we're game to get prepped up and go. If the answer is no, we'll coordinate with MPO to unallocate the funds, and it goes back into, which happens every cycle. There's a pot that gets redistributed because it's not uncommon for projects to get allocated for some reason or another, don't move forward. And we're a participant, in those processes. And we'll continue to address traffic impacts to the downtown core with pedestrian safety, traffic calming strategies, other means. I think we could even, look at how we could pursue some of the data collection that might be useful. Lane County does do trip count stuff, but we could work with them on future stuff, and then really the final bullet is where I think it probably best lives, is ensuring that this north end collector, for lack of a better word, is addressed with the future TSP and UGB expansion work, which is, we'll get to the last item on the agenda is the TSP, just a kind of an update, but that is on tap. We have our UGB line is the same as our city limits line, and that can't stay that way forever.
Thank you, Adam. And I definitely have some thoughts on this, but if other people want to go first, Councilor Lehman.
So 41,000 would be from the city funds to support this study. If it were approved eventually and constructed, who would pay for that? And then can you also implement an ordinance that would require certain gross vehicle weights to use the bypass, or only voluntary?
That's a question for ODOT and Lane County. I doubt it. When you're building a new one, you have to build it for that. Those are usually, when you limit them, it's because they're old and they don't support it. They don't support the weight of either a bridge or a culvert or something. I think it would be unlikely that you'd ever build one that would limit. I mean, you would say limit it through here. You would have to make some sort of determination that the roadway surface doesn't support that. And it's a county facility. So I think the answer would be no. I'm not the definitive on that I don't think you could force this to be used. Construction costs wouldn't necessarily be ours. You know, if there was a match, you know, that I could conceivably say the county, if the county even was willing to, you know, go to bat for some external funding source for this, which that's where it would be. They don't have it either. I doubt they would want to support the match themselves if it's a project that is to, you know, to alleviate the downtown kind of ambiance when the road surface itself from a pure transportation definition accommodates it. They are doing their job, Lane County is, by having a road that works for this capacity. So there wouldn't be any reason for them to fund something. I think, you know, we were trying to estimate the project cost, you know, looking at taking a $250,000 per block. That's a residential street. This is a much wider, this is a North Industrial looking street, you know, 40, maybe 50-foot paved, curb to curb, likely needing to have some sort of a, you know, bike lane or multimodal facility to it as well. You know, an 80 to 100-foot right of way, you know, lots, big expensive street, 10 million. You know, large expense. Even a 10% match is $1 million, and that's, you know, that's you know, the tough, just for comparison, the tough's about 160,000 a year, and that would be, you know, it'd be $1 million just for the match. So I think that, you know, the dollars get really big on these, and it would have to be a regionally important project for the county to even, you know, go for the funding. Now, the feasibility study helps build that case, maybe, or it also validates that it may not be a high priority. And that's the pro with saying yes to moving forward on something like this, is you find out. I think our take is, and our job as staff is to give you kind of some early kind of professional opinion that it's, you know, it's not likely to be very feasible. And then there's the practicalities that are inherent also.
Did you have something? Thank you, Councilor Wells, or
Well, I
thought I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I heard that.
Well, I mean, this is why I joined city council. I mean, although it may turn out in this feasibility study that it is not necessary right now, I think we have to address the traffic that goes through downtown Coburg at some time. And if this gets us closer to that, albeit we don't do anything for 10 or 15 years, are we not better off? Now, yeah, I know the feasibility study might change in 10 or 15 years, but I can't think of why this wouldn't turn out to be something that is deemed necessary. I mean, you look at Sisters, Oregon, for example. I mean, it was 25 years ago. I mean, they were struggling with traffic coming through downtown. They finally got around to putting in a collector or a bypass, if you will. Right. And I think we have to do it. I know it's going to take a lot of staff time, and maybe the design of having it come across on the north side isn't the most logical. Maybe it comes down, you know, Bottom Loop Road and then cuts over to the east. I don't know, but that's why we do the feasibility study, right? Is to determine the most likely path, the most feasible from an economic standpoint and from a transportation standpoint. But I don't think we drop it right now.
No arguments. No, I mean, this is a council discussion. We have no arguments with moving forward. We just want to be sure that council still agrees with something that has been kind of on the burner for a while. And there are some indicators from both, you know, of the regional transportation folks in the, you know, that don't know that this really gets anywhere. And I think the Sisters example, while I understand it, that's a state highway, right? So that is a state highway facility through town. You know, this this is quite a different thing than that. I don't disagree with any of those. And again, it's not an argument. We'll move forward and we just have to recognize that this becomes a 2026, 27 priority. You know, when we talk retreat, this means that other things don't happen. Nothing happens, but this is a large undertaking, and we just want to be sure that council, you know, agrees that this is the time to double check that and be sure. And there absolutely no argument. You don't have to convince staff of anything. It's a discussion amongst the 7 of you, 6 tonight, but 7 of you about the merits of moving this ball forward. So that's all.
Did we have any questions or comments from planning commissioners on this one? Or Commissioner Bainey?
Maybe just a little context though. When the developer purchased the property over that's now the industrial park, Mr. Lee, this was actually proposed to him. I said, well, why don't we just come right through your development here and wipe out these buildings? And he's strongly against that happening. So I understand, you know, the transportation. In fact, my wife and I was talking about the other day. Oh, we got to get Rexius trucks out of here and do something. But I don't know that this is going to be a solution. And I think, and Megan talked about the legal aspects of just state goals and all that stuff. But I think a big roadblock would be getting that industrial park property traffic through that area. I think that would really be a hard road to hoe. I think that would happen.
Yeah, that's the stuff we've heard, similar anecdotal stuff. I haven't talked with Mr. Lee recently, but if you look at the map, you know, it's splitting Coburg North. That's a commercial, it's an industrial condominium group with multiple buildings. You know, I don't know from a practical, I haven't measured between buildings. Is there enough right away even to put a main road through there? It's not at the end of North Industrial. It's not coming in at the very north end. That has its own problems. That's an actual regulated protected wetland. It won't come in at the end of North Industrial. So, you know, it does have, there are multiple challenges, and Councilor Wells, your point of it, you know, it may be a different location is a better location. That's the other thing that when I first got here and heard of this, that's more what I thought the feasibility study was looking at maybe a laundry list of 3 or 4 different potential routes. This not what this is. This only is an evaluation of that particular roadway. So it would not, the feasibility study does not cover, hey, if this, what are the pros and cons versus this east-west connector in this location versus bottom loop versus other areas. It's not.
It's not.
It's not.
It's
No,
just
it is
to-
just that. It is just that. So that's what, you know, that's another element of you know, is this level of detail for this particular pathway the right time to do it? You know, the broader question of, you know, solving or, you know, addressing, you know, I don't know that solving it's going to necessarily happen, but, you know, mitigating, and different routes and different opportunities to mitigate, would probably be a different funding application. And it may be, you know, less dollars because you're not doing as deep of a dive. This is a deep dive into that route, and it's power line to North Industrial. So it's pretty specific.
Yeah, so I think I'll jump in with my comments because that's kind of what I was noticing about I didn't realize that either, Adam, when, you know, I thought the same thing as you, that this would be a study that would look at the problem, which is we have a bottleneck here, this intersection that's right by our fire station, Coburg Fire. It's the intersection of West Van Dyne Street, and to the north is North Coburg Road, to the south, it's Coburg Loop Path. That intersection is a bottleneck. And anybody coming from northwest of Coburg that wants to get to Eugene has to come through that one intersection. There's no other possible road to go on. So that's, to me, is the problem that we need to solve. And so I think it is somewhat time in the future, that intersection or one of these intersections or part of this, our main street is going to fail, and there will need to be a different route. My concern is I don't think the route should be going through our residential neighborhoods. That means there probably needs to be, unfortunately, discussion about, is it feasible to build a new road? But what I don't like about this feasibility study is finding out that it's limited to a very deep dive on this very specific route that probably, based on anecdotal notes that have been taken or mentioned tonight, it isn't feasible, this specific route. So
I didn't realize that either.
yeah, so I think that is, for me, kind of my thinking anyway on this. We don't have to decide tonight, but that's, yeah, Councilor Bowman. Decide today.
For me, when I look at this specific route and hear all the elements that would go into it, plus the legal barriers, which I happen to know a little bit about just because I've collected a lot of stuff up here. Don't ask why. I've spent some long nights researching some very dry stuff. It's a bit like climbing the stairs to nowhere. And I hear about all this stuff and I think, oh my gosh, what a headache. And we have to do it in 2026, 2027. That's coming up. Maybe we better hold off until we have a more detailed discussion about what the right option is, rather than deep diving into what is probably the wrong option.
Thank you. And Councilor Smith?
I had just, I think that, okay, go ahead.
Go, Smith.
Go ahead.
First of all, Megan, in discussion with Goal 12 and the transportation planning, it's very clear that this particular project is probably dead going in. It's thou shalt not build a new road, especially in the sense that it is for urban needs. What we're looking at is urban needs to reduce the traffic flow through downtown Coburg. So that's an urban needs. The other thing you should consider is what the county can do in regards to look at Willamette Street and Van Dyne, and what steps they will take in looking at those streets to increase the capacity. How can they go about increasing the capacity of those roads? They have to show that they can no longer increase that capacity, which means looking at the street, what can they do? Can they widen? Can they reduce parking, et cetera, reduce speeds or increase speeds? All those things need to be addressed. So I would say that from a feasibility standpoint, going ahead with this study is probably a waste of money. The other thing that I think we should consider is maybe asking staff to really come up with some of the stumbling blocks that, and make a list of them back to you, saying these are the issues that are in front of you right now, and try to say this is why this particular project or the feasibility project would die. And I think that's important. The other thing, and I don't think we really looked at the scope, and this little bit of map that we look at really doesn't address the scope of the issue of our transportation around Coburg. We've got, as Council Smith said, Harrisburg is growing like crazy. We're getting a lot of traffic coming into this area. We're also going to start looking at trucking, increased trucking, both coming out of the Miller quarry up the road here. There's a potential that we're going to get more trucks coming into town and reclamation of the the quarry work that's being done, mining work that's being done on this side of the river by Wildish. So I really think we need to look at a broader scope if we're going to look at a potential bypass, and that means really getting with other partners, ODOT, and start really looking at a wider scale than just this little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Marshall.
That answered a lot of my questions, and then the fact that, you know, you're on the transportation lane act. That makes, yeah, and that expertise from those of you who have lived it really, really does help. I think maybe if we could do some sort of a ongoing trip check data so that we can show how traffic and what kind of traffic has increased over the next few years. Do we really still need it? Was this at a time when we had a lot of log trucks, when we had a lot of freight go through, and that maybe, except for now's not a good time to talk about that because of the I-5 paving project, but it still doesn't alleviate. It doesn't alleviate what comes into Coburg and turns and goes out Pearl. It's still, we've still got that issue, and that seems to be the issue most people are most concerned about right now. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
In terms of Commissioner Marshall's comment about city staff putting together a list, that's definitely our, our plan. What we didn't want to do is bombard you with preload you with what we think. We want to lay it out there, and I think there are some 6 to 8 bullets of things that we've hit on here that we can get a little more specific on, that might help when we have a formal conversation with council at a business meeting. But no, this is exactly what I was hoping for, is a conversation to make sure we're all on the same page with at least what this is, what's in front of it, and what we can do. And because we do have 2 other slides that really are probably a perfect segue, because this conversation really does mean this is TSP conversation, is we're having transportation system plan conversations, broader than one thing. And this came from, the 2013 TSP, which brings up the thing of, is the TSP, we need to review it, update it, and get it approved and adopted. So we'll just hit it real quick, what a transportation system plan is. Future vision for transportation infrastructure that's cohesive with the land use planning objectives. It ensures efficient build out of transportation systems that match, and sometimes we're allowed, anticipates, the laws don't always allow you to anticipate. You have to match and somewhat anticipate, then you can project the needs of future growth. It's mandated to address all modes of transportation, not just vehicle trips, transit, bike, ped, and the needs of, all of our land use classifications, low density, high density residential, middle housing, everywhere in between, commercial, industrial, all of that. And so our comp plan, our comprehensive, maps, our zoning, all of that stuff interfaces, which of course is why it's valuable to have our planning commission here talking about this together. And the last bit is TSPs are required plans that must be adopted locally and acknowledged by the state with specific legal requirements. So we've hit on a few of these things about urbanization and, rural roads to address urban issues, urban needs. There are just some legal limits to resolving or just rerouting things. The whole point is, in a way, not to reroute, because it just shifts that problem to the next town, right? It's that's the systems approach. And of course, the county has a TSP that they look at it from the next layer up. And all of those should really dovetail together. So Megan's been doing a lot of work on, our TSP, and maybe this next slide can go over, give a snapshot of where it's been, where it is, and what we're working on now, and then maybe a little bit of where we think we'll be, bringing it back to you all for engaging in that.
Sure. So the Most recent TSP that was adopted by the city of Coburg is the 2013 TSP, which is the map that you all have been looking at. That was not acknowledged by the state very much for the reasons that we had discussed with the east-west connector, which is that there was a county road or a rural road shown in our TSP, which is not allowed, and was part of the reason that the LUBA went forward with the remand on the UGB expansion. So that yes.
What does that mean when urban growth boundary is remanded? I know what the word remand means. It means to hold back, but
Yes.
is that the same in this context?
Similar. So the city was proposing to move the city limits line, the urban growth boundary, to the north. But that wasn't able to be done.
Because the LUBA said no.
Yeah, it was appealed to LUBA, right? The final decision of the city was to expand. That decision was appealed by a land use group.
Land Watch.
Land Watch. And, appeals for land use decisions of the city go to the Land Use Board of Appeals, which is LUBA. And to my understanding, I guess this happened before I was here, the area that ended up being next to Premier, the industrial, the 107 acres, that was not a component of the appeal. The appeal was for the residential portion of that. And this road that we're talking about was a component of why the appellants were successful at LUBA, and LUBA remanded it back to the city. And the city hasn't either chose or just didn't choose to rectify it. And there it sits. The industrial portion has that annexation went through and is now in the city limits. But that residential portion, that remand that was kind of snaking out Stallings, was for several reasons, I think more than just the road, but that was a major piece, as I understand, caused the remand, which then caused the TSP not to be acknowledged by the state because it isn't legally able to be acknowledged by the state because it contains something that isn't allowed to be contained.
Okay.
Is it also?
That's helpful. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding the word used and it didn't have a different definition in this context.
Councilor Smith.
And was it because it seems like through Friends of Oregon, they preferred we include Stallings as opposed to farmland? Was that part of the remand? And then the road just sort of was a casualty of the fact that they didn't want us to go into farmland? But
I'm not sure the details of what Land Watch Lane County was hoping, but that
pretty
sounds
specific remand, if I remember right.
that sounds in line with their ethos of protecting the farmland.
Yeah. Because I remember.
But that is essentially, like you said, what happened to the TSP here. So depending on which agency you ask, Lane County and the city of Coburg have both adopted the 2013 TSP, but the state has not acknowledged the TSP since the 1999 version of that plan.
Is there a big difference between the two? The 1999 and the?
Yes. Yes.
She's recommending that or they're recommending that we update the transportation plan anyway, right? Not go with the 2013 plan, but update it to today.
Eventually that will need to be done. Yes, but that will be a large undertaking for which the funding has not been identified.
The timeline that we have on the slides there is kind of gives an indication of where we currently sit. We have done a TSP assessment, and that's the letter that's in your packet for enjoyable evening reading at home. It's just a backdrop. It provides it's a TSP assessment. So it was Megan and folks from DLCD.
And DLCD.
Yeah, ODOT and DLCD. So that's there for your background, and that can, if that generates, additional questions, we'd be glad to talk about it. We're working on some other components, the CFEC components that have some code amendments. There's a bundle of things. I think, it was about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a really cool, very flowchart, convoluted, very challenging flowchart of all the different land use things that Megan's working on that intersect with the planning commission, that also then intersect with the TSP, and ultimately, the TSP relates to the urban growth boundaries and our need to, when we talk full TSP update, we will obviously need to talk about where that UGB line should be. Those things are hard to separate because they're not supposed to be separated. These are both long range planning documents.
But
And another,
does that mean we need to apply for another UGB approval in conjunction with the TSP? Do we have to go through that process again with LUBA in order to upgrade the TSP? Are those two connected?
It only goes to LUBA if somebody appeals it, right?
No, but the urban growth boundary study was, do we have to redo that in conjunction with the TSP? That what I'm
they
hearing.
don't have to happen at the same time, but I think that the city in the next few years will be looking at doing a UGB analysis.
And ultimately,
They do kind of play
Yeah.
together, but don't have to be.
Not contingent, but they're parallel.
One should
they
the other.
right. They have overlap, obviously, about, you need to know what your future road transportation system is going to look like, where you're planning to expand the UGB, though those have to go together. And any UGB expansion is a start over, right? It's a full, there's nothing that's in there from the remand that is a slide in kind of thing. It's expanding the line. So when you expand the UGB, you have to meet all of the DLCD requirements, all the state law and all that stuff. So it's a large undertaking, and what we, not to get into the full, the timeline necessarily. I think we talked about it with Megan saying about 3 or 4 months ago, but what we did last council meeting is the grant with DLCD with LCOG to do the residential buildable lands inventory work and a housing strategy. That is a big step towards understanding what kind of urban growth lands we need to be looking at. If you don't have and we tried the prior year for some grant funding to do a BLI, this route I think will get us residential. And as I kind of hinted at last meeting, that Megan has a bubbling plan here to catch the non-residential part of a BLI with another program. The composite in about a year's time will have a completed BLI, a completed housing strategy, which is a natural move then into talking about urban growth boundaries.
And transportation.
It just takes years and years and years. Nothing will happen in months. It will be in years.
It's good to know it's at least in the process.
Yeah, I mean, those are the steps we're trying to get. You have to have those foundational pieces in order to take the next one, because you have to have that data, or you just can't get anywhere.
I'll just put it a plug for these updates to the transportation system plan and the buildable lands inventory and all of that, because it's hurt us in the past when we being in the situation with this sort of not an updated TSP, because we can't enforce some of the code language that people in Coburg put in there specifically to try to protect the character of the town. So it is important that we actually do this and figure out a way to get it funded, and the sooner than later, because it's 25 years old.
Yep.
And the TSP assessment is sort of the first step in that process. Those two agencies, ODOT and DLCD, kind of determine what level of update is needed and all of the details which are captured in that document. One other thing that came out of that process was that the IAMP, the Interchange Area Management Plan, likely also will need to be updated. And so that's another topic that maybe makes sense for them to be updated concurrently,
And again,
but not necessary.
sorry. In addition, for scale on this, the combo is probably $500,000 in total. 400 for the for the TSP and add on for the IAMP. But again, IAMP, super important. That is a linchpin for economic development of the east side. And, you know, that is a potential barrier to full build out development and employment. And that is important regionally, not just for us. And my final plug, you know, to all this would be, as you see with everything that we talked about, there wasn't a single thing that didn't involve regional partners. ODOT, Lane County, we don't get anything done without them. Even if we took over and had jurisdiction of Pearl and Willamette, we don't get anything done. Funding, studying, approvals, regulatory without our state and local partners. So that's and you know, we have constant, you know, communication with them, and that's, you know, that led to why we wanted to bring up the East-West Connector thing. Is we do talk with our regional partners, and they want the best for the region and us locally, and you know, that's that, and we want to share that information that we get from them to you.
You think the MPO would fund anything like that? These type of studies?
Well, we've got
MPO
what have, where are
allocations.
we knocking? What doors from the TSP?
Yeah.
That
I think
one,
it's possible.
Yep. We have to be ready to do it, right? You know, we have to line up our
The match.
yeah, and a match and the workload and the priority, and that means council as well. There's a lot of work at the council and the community level. So we just have to make sure that we're gearing up our capacity for it, as well as getting in line. And sometimes getting in line takes 2 or 3 years, 4 years. And we're talking about getting in line on water capital. We're talking about getting in line in wastewater capital. We're talking about getting in line in transportation planning. Everybody's getting in line. Yeah.
Any other comments, questions from our commissioners or counselors? All right, staff, anything more that you wanted to wrap up here? I think we're getting toward the end of the agenda.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think, you know, we'll come back and, you know, work with the mayor, of course, on what, you know, the timing of the right agenda to bring this back. It's not urgent. And that's the goal, is to have these things where they're not urgent and there's a decision that you have to make on a certain council business meeting night. So we'll find the right slot and have more detailed conversation and then decide how we want to move forward.
And if there's anything specific that would
Right.
alleviate your curiosity to get to yes or no, be
Yeah.
always great to know that.
Yep. Send any thoughts that of either confusion, question, added material I think would be helpful for when we get there so we can be prepped.
Well, thank you all very much, staff. Thank you for our commissioners for your time, and counselors, as always, thank you. And with that, we'll adjourn the meeting at 7:44.
I'm out of here. Yeah. You walking? Yeah. Whoa. You nailed it like in 2 sentences, but I talked for like 10 minutes. And you just did it in 2 sentences.
Mr. Marshall? Mr. Marshall?
Nothing gets done. I mean, there's some, the doors are locked. I was just saying, I just thought that. I think part of it, honestly, I think part of it is. When they're initially, just.